I'm Captain Nkutu Gafane. I'm originally from Palabora in a township called Namakhali. That is where I was born and raised. Yes. So I'm a member of the SNDF in good standing. I started in the organization from 2014 until currently.
And where did you study?
Okay, my undergrad was with the Tshwane University of Technology under the umbrella Environmental Health. I completed my national diploma in 2011. Then I continued to study further. I did my bachelor's with the Tshwane University of Technology. When I completed, I went to study, complete my legal knowledge certificate in occupational hygiene with the University of Pretoria. Then after that, I enrolled for my master's degree with the University of Witwatersrand. So I completed my master's degree in 2018. So currently I'm busy with my PhD studies with the University of Witwatersrand.
What is your job description in the South African National Defence Force, specifically in the SAMHS?
Okay, my job occupation in the organization, in the SAMHS particularly, is to provide occupational hygiene services. So the mother body that we register with is the South African Institute for Occupational Hygiene. It's what guides the functions of occupational hygiene in the public sector, which is us, and then also in the private sector. So the profession is vast. It's not only streamlined to the Defence Force. You can work at the Department of Labour, which is the custodian of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, which is why the profession actually started. It is to determine workplace exposures. What can actually harm you in the work environment? Can we quantify what actually harmed you up until to the point where the manifestation of a particular disease? This is what we call occupational diseases, which means it's a disease that arises because of a certain job occupation that you are actually partaking in. So in simplest terms, occupational hygiene, it's to identify workplace exposures, risks, then we classify them. We evaluate whether that risk can actually harm you as the work. Okay, just to explain some of the few instruments that we use. This is a sound level meter, integrated sound level meter. We use it to measure noise levels. So usually the cutoff noise in terms of the OEL is 85 decibels. Above that, it's more likely going to damage your ears over a period of 8 hours, which is a normal shift that it's regulated. Usually everyone works for 8 hours. So what it does is that you can measure noise for nuisance. You can either set it to check that noise that maybe like takes you outside near the working, not that it will create any harmful to your hearing, but does it makes it uncomfortable in your working environment. If your work environment required to be dead silent, we measure noise for nuisance. Then we have instances where we also have our aerodromes, because we have the South African Air Force. There's regulations and bylaws that we must comply with as the SNDF. These occupational hygiene need to go and do what we call environmental noise measurements that we must now give to, for example, we have Waterkloof as an aerodrome. There's residents around that area. So we need to check that our operations as the SNDF doesn't disturb the living and the livelihood of those that reside within the environment. So we must be able to submit either quarterly or monthly. It depends on how we schedule it with the municipality and also the Department of Labour. So we use these instruments. If we are going to do environmental noise, we might actually do it at night, because that is when it's at more quietness. Then we can now prove that yes, Although we have an airport there, but it's not like OR Tambo that is always busy. It's only at certain times. If we measure the noise and then we convert it to a monthly exposure to the community, we are still within the bylaws. In Tshwane, for example. So we use these instruments. These instruments is what we call a Quest Temp Stress Monitor. So what it does is that it measures 3 parameters. It measures your air temperature, then it also measures your drop temperature, which is your radiant heat, and then also measures the air that you actually need to cool up. So, and also does actually check your humidity. So the component that we actually measure with the temp stress is what we call a WBGT. It's an index, wet bulb temperature, WBGT index. So in that parameter, so this is your air temperature, this is your wet bulb, this is your drop temperature. So all these parameters combined, they bring what we call an index. So which means if you are exposed, for example, you go to Lewat, it's various temperatures that maybe soldiers might be exposed to. We'll go there and determine what is the purpose of that operation. Maybe the purpose of the operation is to have soldiers acclimatized to a certain country that is similar to that environment. So we will now look at, okay, how do we acclimatize our soldiers best without now putting so much pressure in them? How do we now formulate that training so that we gradually increase the intensity as time goes on? But we must not neglect that the body must acclimatize. That is the most important thing. So we will go and measure the extreme temperatures. What is the temperature at its hottest? And then also, what is the temperature when it's at coldness? What is the humidity around? Will the body, if it's hot, will you sweat? And then is there any moving air in terms of velocity, etc., to cool up your body? Remember, the body, if you feel heat, what it does, it sweat, so that it can do what? It can get rid of excess heat. So through that sweating, there must be some cool air that will do what? Will cool off the body. So we need to check that, are we having certain parameter, temperature parameter, and then is it balanced? If it's not balanced, we inform whoever is conducting that training. Be aware that during this time, if you are going to conduct a training, do ensure that the soldiers consume a lot of liquid, even though the environment there, because we cannot now say the operation must stop because it's harsh conditions. We actually want those harsh conditions, but what we do is we must gradually introduce our soldiers to those hard conditions so that you don't have people collapsing, fainting on the first day of your exercise. So these instruments informs us about meteorological conditions where we are going. So we can go and conduct those measurements. It gives us a clear indication. Then we can inform the training schools that if you are going to do this at this season, you must be aware that the temperatures are at this. Then the WBGT index, it's either higher than the minimum requirement, which is 30 degrees Celsius usually, but in the act they don't actually put the reading there. But because it's temperatures, and in South Africa we measure it in degrees Celsius, so that is the unit. But its intended use is that we support operations. We use these instruments to find out if we are going to conduct a certain operations there, what will those people that are going to actually establish maybe a temporary base in that particular environment to conduct a certain operation, what are they going to be exposed to temperature wise? The instruments I'm having, it's an indoor air quality meter, which measures the quality of air. In hospital setting, more specifically in this time of COVID and the pandemic, it's important to ensure that the indoor air quality is of good quality, and then we maintain the proper parameters so that in order to prevent cross-contamination, also to prevent the spread of the virus in itself. One of the most component that is being for years the greatest savior in terms of controlling ambient air, it has been ventilation. Proper ventilation does neutralize and then also provide what we call mixing. What is it is that if the air is contaminated with a particular foreign object, can be a mineral, can be a microorganism, the introduction of fresh air will do what? Will neutralize the concentration of whatever is in the atmosphere. That is a method of mixing. We also have a method where we might use what we call mechanical ventilation. Mechanical ventilation can be in the force of an exhaust system. Exhaust system works where you do what? You withdraw all the contaminants from a building. For example, a hospital with an isolation room. Preferably, isolation room must be under negative pressure. The reason being, if it's under negative pressure, which means everything that comes through will be sucked out of that particular hospital. So, but if you suck something, you must also introduce something. You will need also a force system. So, a fresh air must also be introduced into that particular air. It can be a working condition or it can be a hospital setting where you keep your own patients. So this instrument, what it does is that it gives us parameters that can give you an indication whether the air is contaminated or not. For example, when you breathe in oxygen. Oxygen is good for our body. When you breathe out carbon dioxide, which means it's what? It's a byproduct. A byproduct that we want to get rid of. So what we use in terms of actually assisting COVID patients, oxygen, because one of the symptoms and one of the difficulties is what? Difficulty in breathing. So the more we get rid of carbon dioxide, which means the fresher the air is, the more supportive the environment will be to our patient. So this instrument measures carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, oxygen content in the atmosphere, and also the temperature. So all those parameters are regarded as the ones that will give you an indication whether the quality of air is good or it's bad. So we use these instruments in those settings to now determine whether the indoor quality is of good quality or bad quality. This next instrument, we call it it's a velocity meter. So what it checks is it checks the speed of air. So in my previous explanation, I explained the indoor air quality meter where you introduce and you also extract the air. So this instrument will tell us the air that we introduce, at what speed is that air traveling in the air ducts. If we are using an HVA system is the heating, ventilation, air conditioning system. Usually it will be centralized and then it will be transported from floor to floor, room to room by air ducts. Therefore, you will have your inlets and outlet. Outlet will be the ones that are from the exhaust system where you extract the contaminated air in that particular building. So we use this because you might find that our system is installed on top. So the speed of air from where you installed and to the last place where you want to actually the air to travel won't be the same, because remember it's fans that drive that air. So what we want to know is if it's installed on the 14th floor, will the first floor still have the same air as opposed to the 14th floor? Yeah. So the closer you are to the system, the more you're going to get. So, but what we are trying to do is that the further you are, we want to test whether you are still actually capable of getting the air supply that someone who's closest to the fan is also getting. So it must be evenly distributed across the air ducts. So we check the speed of air and the deposition of that particular air in that working environment, or it can be a building. So it helps us in that regard.
That's it.